All right, let me stop presenting. All right, welcome everyone. I'm so excited that everyone is here. Change the layout right quick so I can get a feel for everyone that is here today. We appreciate so much your time and attention. This is a wonderful opportunity, and I am really blessed every Black History Month to be able to bring our presentation before you. And this year, I am getting the opportunity to come together with some of my favorite physical therapists and favorite physical therapist assistants to talk about our profession and the evolution of the Black physical therapist. So without further ado, we will get started. I want to firstly introduce our panel on tonight. All of us are represented up at the top of my screen. I'm not sure if that's the way you're seeing it, but we have the panel behind us, the red, black, and green panel behind us. And so as I introduce you, panel, if you could just wave your hand, that will be a wonderful time to acknowledge who you are. Thank you for taking your time to be with us on today. All right, so our first panel member is Mr. Bernard Alsberry Jr., Mayor of the Village of Hazelcrest, and he is the second Vice President of Illinois Municipal League, co-chair, advocate at South Suburban Hospital Governing Council, executive board member of South Suburban United Way. He's a board member of the Southland Chamber of Commerce. He is a veteran, and he is has been a Village of Hazelcrest trustee. And Mayor Alsberry has held workshops throughout the Southland and at Governor State University. Mayor Alsberry also is a widower and blended family of 9 children, 14 grandchildren, and 1 great grandson. And he is a physical therapist assistant. So that is our panel, Mr. Alsberry. All righty. And then we have Dr. Dawn Brown. She is an assistant professor in the Doctor of Physical Therapy program with over 23 years of clinical and educational experience. She completed her Bachelor of Psychology degree and Master's of Physical Therapy degree at Northwestern University. And let's see what else I want to say about her. She's a board certified orthopedic specialist. And Dr. Brown is an active member and leader within the American Physical Therapy Association, the Illinois Physical Therapy Association, the American Council of Academic Physical Therapy, and American Academy of Physical Therapy, and National Association of Black Physical Therapists. Welcome, Dr. Dawn Brown. Then next we have Dr. Carmen Cox. She is a native of Decatur, Georgia. She received her doctorate in physical therapy from Alabama State University and her bachelor's degree in exercise science at Alabama A&M University. She has an abundance of experience teaching neurological and orthopedic conditions, treating neurological and orthopedic conditions with a certification in dry needling. Dr. Cox is also a certified lymphedema specialist. She is a co-founder of the one and only physical therapy game, Physio Trivia, which I have my copy of, and she co-owns Top Notch Physical Therapy, Motion, and Wellness with her husband, who is also a physical therapist. So welcome, Dr. Carmen Cox. All right, and then we have Ms. Kafira Fields, who is a physical therapist assistant. She is a Malcolm X graduate, and I got to teach Ms. Fields. So she has been licensed as a PTA for over 2 years with hands-on experience in a variety of settings, including long-term care, outpatient rehab, home health, and inpatient rehab. She specializes in orthopedic therapy, skillful with patients and transfers and mobility. She is a safe patient handling equipment and mobility educator, and she is a member of the Association of Safe Patient and Handling Professionals, the IPTA and the APTA, and she is a former student ambassador for the student recruitment for the APTA. Welcome, Ms. Fields. All right, and then next we have Dr. Jackson. Dr. Jackson is a physical therapist, health advocate, and citizen. She is a lifelong learner who has spent a career, focusing on the optimization of the functionality of individuals across their lifespans. She holds a bachelor's degree in physical therapy from Georgia State University and a master's of public health from the University of South Carolina and a doctorate in physical therapy from Rosalind Franklin University and a certificate in clinical medical ethics from the University of Chicago's McLean Center. Anne is a clinical assistant professor at the University of Illinois at Chicago in the Rehabilitation Sciences program, and she is also the founder of a community-based nonprofit organization, the Center for Food Equity in Medicine. Welcome, Dr. Jackson. All right, and then our last panelist is Dr. Shandi Edmonds. She received both her master's and her doctorate in physical therapy from Northwestern University Feinberg School of Medicine in Chicago, Illinois. Dr. Edmonds' experience includes serving as assistant professor and director of clinical education at Northwestern University, as well as an adjunct at multiple DPT programs and a graduate school specializing in early childhood careers. Her love for health and wellness led to training and experience in Pilates-based rehabilitation, perinatal fitness, and Pilates and yoga for children with special needs. So I hope you understand and know that my panel is well equipped on today to answer any questions that you all might have. But I want to start out today just talking a little bit about the history of our profession. Those of you who attend Prairie State College have probably been through this class with me before, especially if you are interested in the field of physical therapist assistant. So the history of our profession is like this. We know for decades and centuries, therapeutic arts has been around. The use of hydrotherapy and things of that nature have been around for centuries. But it wasn't until the polio epidemic and World War I that physical therapy came to light in the United States. There was a need for rehabilitation services because of our soldiers going off to war, coming back injured, as well as those children who were victimized by polio. So that is how we came to be in the United States. Mary McMillan was born in the United States, but she was trained in England, and she is known as the first American physical therapist. So in the 1940s, physical therapists in the United States began to discuss the need for a formally trained assistant. And so I'm getting to how we came upon physical therapist assistants as well. That conversation began in the 40s, but then we really did not attain physical therapist assistants until 1969. That was the first graduating class of physical therapist assistants. So let me backtrack now, since we are talking about the evolution of the Black physical therapist. How do we come to play in this profession? We know that Bessie Virginia Blunt was the first noted Black or African-American physical therapist. She studied at Montclair State University and Union County College. She was responsible for inventing an apparatus that soldiers could use that were returning from the war, that were having difficulty feeding themselves. She was actually also the first African-American woman on television to promote the portable receptacle support inventor. That was the tool that I was talking about. So then you might wonder what's going on now. Let's go. She practiced in the 50s. So let's migrate on up and talk about where we stand today in regard to physical therapists and physical therapist assistants. In 2021, it is calculated that only 7.14% of the physical therapist assistants in our country were African American. So that's one thing I want us to focus in on tonight and understand why that number is so low. The numbers for African American physical therapists are mimic and are about the same. And so our panel will talk to us a little bit tonight as to why maybe that is so. So I'm going to let them have the floor, and I get to moderate and listen and learn and hear from them maybe why we're at this point, why we have such a wonderful field and wonderful opportunities to help those people of color, of all nations, all races, but yet we are so represented by so few physical therapists and physical therapist assistants that are of color. So I'm going to hand it over to Dr. Brown. Dr. Brown, our first question on tonight is, how did you create a sense of belonging in the field of physical therapy where there were so few African Americans represented? And this was either in school or in your practice.
Mm-hmm. And hello, everyone. And I appreciate the question. I appreciate being here. So I think, given what you said earlier about the evolution of physical therapy, and then talking about the evolution of the Black physical therapist, we all have to realize that we didn't always belong in this profession, whether it be in leadership, whether it be in education, whether it be in clinical practice, and even in present day. Some of us feel like we still don't belong. And so I think of it from the perspective of being an educator and a doctor of physical therapy program, as well as still being a clinician. How do we create that sense in present day? And so first of all, it is awareness. First, being aware of what does it mean to belong. Oftentimes people talk about diversity, they talk about equity and inclusion, and they think that belonging is the same thing as inclusion, but it's not. We have to make sure that we understand what it means before we can create action to create sustainable initiatives to get that sense of belonging. So we always think about diversity as demographics, who's in the room. We think about equity as allocating resources based upon people's needs. We think about inclusion as being invited to the table. And then some people think of belonging is synonymous with inclusion, but belonging is a sense, it's a feeling. Inclusion is an action. Belonging is the outcome. How can you be at that table as a Black person and be your true authentic self and not have to code switch and not have to speak a certain way, look a certain way? And so before we can create that sense of belonging, we have to know what it is. We have to identify what it is. And then in order for institutions or for clinical facilities to take action, it's to change attitudes, because like I said before, we still don't, as Black people, feel like we belong in a profession despite advances that we've had. There still are decreased numbers with regards to who's in leadership roles, who teaches in institutions, who's in clinical practice. So change the attitudes. Well, how do you change people's attitudes about why and how Black people belong as physical therapists or assistants? Well, collect some data. I'm a researcher, and yes, I got to speak in research terms to a little bit, but collect data quantitatively, qualitatively, do climate surveys, get to know the people in your educational institutions, get to know the people in your clinical facilities, especially Black people, and figure out what they want, what makes them thrive, and how you can sustain that. And then once you create awareness, you change attitudes, now you can jump into action. Well, look at the data that you get, if you will, from the climate surveys, from just an assessment of how people feel, and say, hey, based upon the data, do I need to create, resource groups, affinity groups, so that people feel like they belong and they don't feel like they're the only? I've been there, done that, as being the only in my educational programs when I was in school, as an educator in clinical practice. But how do you create groups so that Black people don't feel like they belong, or feel like they do belong? Create recognition programs, elevate Black voices, elevate Black contributions to physical therapy in these spaces so that we truly feel like we belong, but also recognize that there's intersectionality between our race and ethnicity, as well as gender, as well as our socioeconomic background, as well as our religion, as well as our disability level. So make sure that you understand that there's more to Black physical therapists and Black physical therapist assistants that makes our profession truly what it is today. And then once you get these action items, then make it sustainable. Make sure that it's not a one-off. Make sure that you truly prioritize belonging. Make sure that you truly sustain it.
Wow. Thank you so much for that. What I'm going to ask the panel to do is that if you've got comments on a question, if we've got time at the end of that section before we break, then maybe we can kind of circle back to that. So I appreciate that, Dr. Brown. Thank you so much. I also want to let you all know that I just put in the chat the website for the event, so you can go to it and you can contact any of our panelist members. There are some resources there. The survey is there as well. I'll post it a little bit later, but I just wanted you to know what I just posted in the chat. All right, so let's move on, and we are going to now head to Dr. Edmonds. Your question, Dr. Edmonds, is why does it appear that we are not as prepared as our white counterparts to be successful in PT or PTA school?
Okay, that is a loaded question, obviously. And all of us have had different measures of success or challenges in PTA or PTA school. But two things. I think it goes back to what we have to do to maintain our lives as Black and Brown people. So usually finances are involved in that in some form or fashion. There's some type of, I need to work in order to make sure that I can pay for this education. I need to work to help support my family. I need to work, a lack of funds. Finances always seem to be involved with Black and Brown people when we're talking about higher education. And I do think that is a component that has to be considered or talked about when we're talking about the question of success compared to other students. Are we as PTA students working 2 jobs or a part-time job and going to school? Same with PT. That was, that was me as working a part-time job, and our mind has to do double duty. I have to try and focus on school, but I also have to try and focus on work. I also have to try and focus on family and all the other priorities I have. And so I think the stressors of all of those things really can compound into some of the challenges and why we may not be as prepared. I think the word prepared is also a challenge. So in high school, were we prepared for college? Were we really prepared for college? Were our high school courses or teachers really prepare us for what college courses were for us? And same with college. Did college really prepare us for graduate programs, PTA programs? Did we get study skills classes or coursework? Did we learn how to manage our time before we came into these programs? Did we have opportunities to get coaching around standardized testing and how to test? I think these are factors that we don't necessarily have think about. We may not have had resources to some of this preparation as well. And so those are two big components that I think about when we as a whole may not be prepared compared to our counterparts in order to be highly successful. Yes, you're successful once you graduate. Ooh, I did it. Thank the Lord. I graduated type of thing. But to be highly successful, those are the things that I think are missing. And, nationally, there are statistics that still show that Black and Brown students don't graduate college. The percentage is a lot lower compared to white students. So that is also telling us something and leading us to something. Last thing, in regards to Dawn, Dr. Brown's answer, I think in regards to acceptance into PTA programs and PT programs, there is a tide of change around admissions and how some schools are opening up what they consider are important to their classes, what they want. And Black and Brown students have the opportunity to put forth their characteristic and skills because everybody is now not requiring certain standardized tests or these high levels of GPAs or some of those metrics that made it challenging for us to get into the program in the past. That's my timer going off telling me, okay, stop talking.
Oh, I love it though. I love it. And I think your two questions tie together so well. I had the opportunity to interview Mr. Robert Babbs. I'm putting that interview into the chat as well. And Mr. Babbs was graduated from Northwestern in 1957. And one of the things that he said that was so important to me, that he had a plethora of people generationally to draw from. He had many people that were doctors in his family, and his mom was a nurse. And I just think that sometimes because our base does not begin there, then we have to kind of start over again, right? And so I think that that's just so pertinent in regard to entering school and then the sense of belonging as well. Thank you so much. I appreciate that. All right. And so I neglected to tell you all how we were running this evening. So we're going to go into one more question, and then I will allow you all to have a break, and we'll recollect ourselves, and we'll come back and answer some more questions. But if you, in the meantime, have any questions, you can pop them in the chat. Anything that strikes a chord in you, please feel free to go ahead and ask those questions in the chat, and I'll make sure that we get to them. Okay, so then the last question that we'll take before our quick break would be from Ms. Fields. Discuss a major roadblock we face as a race in helping younger generations to understand our field and to migrate into our field.
Okay, so like Dr. Edmond said, it's definitely a loaded question because it's multifaceted. But I think the one main issue is lack of exposure. Everybody knows they can be a CNA, they can be a nurse, and they can kind of follow that pathway. But not very many children are exposed to physical therapy in general. If you don't have the money to get specialized treatment from a therapist, then you have no clue that the therapist even exists. But everybody goes to the doctor, sees a nurse, and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But during my time, during student recruitment for the APTA, a lot of the issue was that there was just no exposure, no prior knowledge of the field itself. And what I did during my time there, I did contact with a couple of my friends that are teachers, and they teach middle school and grammar school, and kind of slowly started to introduce those fields of interest to those students so that they would actually have a knowledge of that, as that's something that they can transition to, as opposed to being a nurse or doctor or just a standard kind of medical profession. So I think just exposing them early and often is kind of the one key thing that I think that we could do better and it's a couple people that are support staff at the hospital that I work at, and they are African American, and they had no clue that they could kind of segue into being an actual PTA as opposed to a PT, which is a doctorate. And I've kind of taken them under my wing and kind of explained things to them so that wherever they find themselves, that they actually have the exposure to it.
Yeah. Yes. I think what you said is so valuable and so important, that we are not exposed generationally. Back to, again, what Dr. Babs was talking about. He was ready and prepared to go into school because he had people around him that looked like him that were already succeeding in those fields. And I want to make note too, I know we talked last year about health disparities, and one of the professors at our college talked about how still, even in nursing school and in medical school, we're still underrepresented, but we really are when it comes to our profession, because people in general just don't know what we do. They have no clue what we do. And so I appreciate your comment. And so it behooves all of us to, it's kind of like each one teach one. It's important for all of us to make younger people aware of what we do and that they can do it. And I think I heard Viola Davis say this the other day on something on Instagram. It's like, so access to other people that look like you, that are doing what you need to do, is so vitally important. And you may not think it is, but it really is. If I see you doing it and we are the same color, then it's almost like, okay, well, maybe there's hope, right? And so I think that that's something for us to remember. All right, I am so excited that we are on time. We are on time. We are on time. So what we are going to do, it is 6:29. We are going to take a short break. I won't shut the recording off, but we will come right back at 6:35, answer a couple of more questions, and then I am excited to hear what our audience members have to say. All right, so I am going to take a break, and you all can come on back in 5 minutes, 6:35. Right. Okay, am I back? Can you hear me?
Yes.
Good. All right. All right. Every time I hear that music, it feels like Wakanda, Wakanda, Wakanda. Do you hear that when I comes on Wakanda, Wakanda? All right. Sorry. All righty. Let's continue with our program. Give me 1 second to exit out of there so I can get back to my script. Okay. All right. So now, Dr. Jackson, we're coming to you. Are you ready?
I'm ready.
All right. Your question is, how do health and equity show up in your practice? That's a loaded question too. Who made up all these questions?
I think you did. I think you did. So my question is, how do health equity show up? And I think that probably one of the reasons why I picked this question was I think that we are some of the most powerful people on the healthcare team. We are with our patients more than almost any other provider that they will see during the course of an illness or some sort of recovery from an injury. And I think that because we represent such a small group of people, it's also reflected in what happens to our patients. And so the idea of equity is just like the other questions, it's very multifaceted, but the idea is that when there is not justice, equity, diversity, and inclusion, then true equity is not achieved. And so what we see showing up is that students who are trying to get into the profession, there's not equity because of all the things that Dr. Edmonds said about what students need. And my term is undergirthing. I believe that there is a certain amount of underlying support, not social webs, not social determinants of health, but what Dr. Babs is talking about, this undergirthing that supports and helps you develop these pillars. And without them, there is no true equity. And so when we see the lack of equity, we see it in our ability to have access to admissions to programs, our ability to matriculate through programs because of all the things Dr. Edmonds said. And then when we are in service to people, because we are so underrepresented, even when we go into our own communities, often we are not the decision makers about the policies that surround the care of people who look like us. So I did a little comparison. And so in 2022, there were approximately 239,000 physical therapists in America. For those of us who live in Illinois, that roughly represents the population of Springfield and its collar communities. The number of Black physical therapists taken from our 7.14 roughly represents the population of Homewood, Illinois, which is little under 22,000. It's about 22,000 people. And so if you think about the population of Homewood is all the Black physical therapists in America, and you scatter us about, we are not in every corner. We are not in every community where Black people exist. And I say Black people in particular because what has happened, and another evidence of this lack of equity, is that society, statistics, are now grouping Black and brown people together. I love my brown brothers and sisters. I have nothing against them, but I will tell you that when we are all rolled together in the granola, we lose our flavor, and our ability to find true equity as a group is lost because we are in the milieu with everyone else, and organization systems feel like as long as they've got this granola, that's enough. So they do not lift us out to try and help identify and address the issues that Dr. Brown, Dr. Edmond have already stated are problematic for our ability to matriculate in these systems, to be effective as practitioners when we're in healthcare systems, and even to be advocates for ourselves and for our loved ones when they enter healthcare systems.
Wow. Wow. You all are bringing some true enlightenment to the reason why we end up having the trouble that we're having so much. And so I really appreciate all that you all are saying. I hadn't thought about that too when you think about Black and brown and the coupling of them and all of that. So interesting, so interesting. Okay, and so I'm going to move to Mr. Alsbury right now, so you can answer this question, and then Dr. Cox, you can end us up here, and we'll go into some Q&A. So your question, sir, is how can those in leadership positions improve the recruitment, retention, and persistence of Black PTs and PTAs and students?
Well, good evening, everyone. Good to see everyone. I haven't seen some of you guys in so long. Oh my God. But I've known most of you, a lot of you for a very long time. But that question really is not only for people in leadership, but for all of us. How do we all become a part of making sure that we bring young therapists and older therapists into leadership? Because that's always a balancing act. Because you don't have to be a therapist or PT assistant for years to be in leadership. You know, some of us come from backgrounds that we've already been in other professions and doing other things in healthcare. And then you become a therapist, but those leadership skills and those relationships that you carry from what you used to do before they made you a PhD or have your doctorate, because a lot of us were PTs before they were DPT. So the leadership component is for all of us to be involved in. But we do have to reach back, and all of us are saying this, back into the middle schools, back into the high schools, to prepare young folks to know what physical therapy is all about. I remember watching a movie with Queen Latifah, and she was a PT. And as y'all say that, we was like, what is she doing? You know, because it was shocking that they had this PT going to the house, doing all these other things. And we're like, we don't do that. And so it's still a gap in education for us, both white and Black therapists, about what we actually do and what we actually serve. And one thing I could say about my 36 years in physical therapy is that, you know, in the therapy world, the patients we treat, majority of patients who need our services are people who look like us, you know, because we don't get treated when we have strokes all the time. We don't get treated all the time when we have injuries, because we don't have the healthcare insurance to actually have a therapist or have a therapist involved in our lives. So we become not only have this debilitating injury, we become disabled because we're not able to get back into the workforce because we don't have that relationship with therapists, and we don't have enough of us working within our communities. So when we talk about getting therapists into leadership, I think we need to be more involved in being able to get therapists in school, because it's not always about the grades. How many of you have been to school? Your classmates have the outstanding grades, and when you graduate, you're the only one still working in physical therapy, because it's more than your academia. Is, do you really care about people? You know, Bear said this earlier in your interview. We have gotten away from touching patients. When I work with Ann, the first thing Ann used to do is touch patients. Let me hug you. Let me, you know, just put my body on you, because that is part of the healing process. You can't stick ultrasound on someone, or e-stim on someone, and they may get better. But if you're not touching that patient as a therapist, that patient's not going to get better or have that conversation with you, because sometimes more than a physical ailment, it's actually that mental ailment that you need to get past. And then when we talk about therapists in the profession and therapists doing well in school, I mean, we all, as Black Americans, we carry a lot of trauma with us, you know, and with the profession being more Black female, we carry even more trauma, because you got to worry about how you look, how you talk, what you're going to wear today, you know, how your hair is going to look today, when others just get up, shake their head. So a lot of those pieces would make us Black therapists is something that we need to actually acknowledge, and respect, and support each other. Sometimes we could be our worst enemies, and we need to be more supportive of our young therapists who are coming to the profession, educating young people about what therapy is about, and actually helping us open practices, be in private practice, be in leadership, and be in education, where we can kind of mentor those young therapists who are coming through, who just don't know how to handle some of the trauma they may participate as they become growing in a profession.
Man, you all are speaking truth. I just want to have a, I don't know, I want to have a powwow session. You just want it to be different. And I love, we're going to show a little bit of the interview with Dr. Babs in a minute, because I just think it's important to hear someone who was a professional, became a physical therapist in the 50s, and he's still saying what's important to us today, this many years later. And so that's so important. Thank you, Mr. Ellsbury. All right, Dr. Cox, you are going to end our session with questions, and we'll move into some Q&A. So this question to me is a little bit kind of connected to Mr. Ellsbury's. It says, what demands can we place on the physical therapy associations and the local and national governments to change the face of our profession to reflect more Black and Brown clinicians?
Hello. First, I want to say thank you for having me. Also a loaded question. A lot of people have my answers that I got written down already in their answer, but it's okay. I want to say first, it just starts with acknowledgement from everybody at different levels. So from the associations, from the government, from local programs. It just all starts with acknowledgement before we can actually fix the problem. I agree with everyone that said about reaching back into the schools. So one of the things I said would be great is creating initiatives that will begin exposing minorities in elementary school, middle school, high school, into the exposing them to the physical therapy fields. And so, but before we even can do that, because I feel like even after we do all that, reaching to the high schools, doing all this to get kids, get higher GRE scores. I know some of them don't, but they do require that for some schools just to even get a interview. And so before you can even get to that, I think it'll be very important for us to demand CAPTE to require a certain percentage of African Americans on the admission boards in the schools, because you can do all this stuff to get students prepared, and then boom, there goes your stopping because we do not have a seat at the table on the admission boards at these schools. And so then it's like, okay, I have all this, I've done all the work, but now I have these individuals that's like, okay, we're not accepting these, we're not accepting these individuals in our program. And so I think we should definitely require a certain percentage of us on the admission boards, and then also a certain number of African Americans in the cohorts as well when accepting. And I think when that happens, it makes them do more outreach programs for each school to seek African American students who are interested, and even those that are not, interested, but just teaching them about the field that they might not have been exposed to. So I think that is the very number one before you can do anything else, because like I said, we can do all this and then boom, it stops from from us not having a seat at that table. I think also having different bridge programs, different scholarships. I know a lot of us said we worry about things financially. I still do. Okay. And so that is a big thing. I just had the mindset, well, God, if you just get me into PT school, I know you'll make a way for me to pay for it. I'm not going to worry about where it might not be paid right now, but it will down the line. But those are things that what deters people from, going further into PT school. Like I had not colleagues, but I had people that I went to school with, and we thought we all want to do physical therapy, but when they find out all the different prerequisites, when they find out I have to send my GRE to all of these schools, and have to pay for them all, and then they see the cost, they did something else. They went to be a teacher, or they went to exercise science or wanting to do something else, but they, you know, they were always talking about physical therapy, but when those different financial burdens came along with it, it was just like, no, I'm just gonna, you know, do something else. So I think having different federal grants that we can create, and different scholarships that will also help with these with that financial burden, that could definitely help us. And then also just assistance within the program. So another problem is with us also, if we get in the program, it's also completing the program as well. I've known more individuals that have a harder time just trying to keep, you know, trying to keep that, oh, I can't, you know, I have to have this C average. And I feel like when I was in school, it was more so, I feel, and everybody may not have experienced this, but it wasn't more of a support system. It was more so of, okay, if you don't do this, that's it. You're out. Instead of it, okay, let's see what we need to do to help you along the way. You know, you've made it this far. You've done all the work. We want you here. It's not, almost like, I don't know if anybody went to HBCU, but it's not family oriented in that sense. Even with me going to a HBCU, it was its own bubble, and it didn't feel family oriented in that small bubble. Because even in my class of 25, it was only five to six African Americans, even at Alabama State. I don't even know how that happens, but it does at all the schools. And so, so even just having those programs that I think many of us need, just to get through the program, and it doesn't even have to be as far as with our grades either. It's emotionally as well, because when I was in school, it was a lot of political things going on that I was traumatized by. And my husband, he didn't have the same experience, but with my cohort, it was a lot different. And so I had more stressors during my graduate programming than I should have had going through PT school. And so I think having those different assistance during the program as well also helps with people completing the program and realizing, you know, this is what I'm here for, this is my why, and somebody is waiting for me to complete this, for me to, you know, for me to complete this so that I can help them. And so those are some of the different things that I think will help.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate all of you. I think it's stuff that we already know, but because we are so poorly represented in many spaces, I don't think sometimes we have that sense of belonging that Dr. Brown talked about to even talk about it, right? When we, at least for me, when I see myself as the only someplace, I buck up and try to present the best I can, and some of that code switching, all of that comes into play, and I'm not my true or authentic self. And I think that we need more organizations and more opportunities like this to just come together and to belong, and to feel like, oh, I'm not alone. I'm not the only one. It feels good. And I'm not saying that other people don't make me feel welcome and other people have not embraced me. My colleagues of all colors have helped me. I'm in a very new position and I need their help. And so I'm not negating that, but I do think that there is some when there is some emphasis on someone who looks like you, it does make a difference. So thank you, panel, for all of your comments. I really appreciate them. We are going to now open up the floor to any comments that our audience might have. This is an opportunity for you to ask direct questions to our panel or just questions in general. You can put those questions in the chat or you can unmute yourself and ask away. And I might call on somebody if I don't see a question answered.
You know, one thing too, Ron, is that it's not only us, it's our patients. When you go to a community that's predominantly African-American and you have that therapist there, they are just able to talk with you. And in most areas, you're still mostly all white therapists. And so they'll seek out that Black therapist and say they really got a problem. and you can really talk to that person. Or, because you could be in some hoods that are very difficult. I was at Trinity. It can be rough sometimes. But I could step to a person differently than my counterpart who will come and get me and say, man, this guy's really acting up. You know, because they have a fear factor when they're dealing with our people, which is not necessary, but they do.
Yes, yes. Okay, we have a question. I'm going to read it, and then whomever wants to answer, please feel free to do that. Given the diverse admissions and affirmative action are given that diverse admissions and affirmative action are under attack at the level of the Supreme Court, how are academians plan? I'm not sure. Academics. How are professors planning to face these challenges to grow a more diverse healthcare workforce? Let me read that again. Given the diverse admissions and affirmative action are under attack at the level of the Supreme Court, how are academia, I'm not saying that correctly, planning to face these challenges to grow a more diverse healthcare workforce? Dr. Brown, go ahead.
I can start this off as a assistant professor in a DPT program. You know, unfortunately, in the political climate that we're in today, there's a lot of divide. And I can point to Florida, for instance, where I know a lot of physical therapy professors that are there that are leaving the state, unfortunately, because of their hands being tied with regards to not only what they teach, but how they conduct their admission practices, especially if their mission aligns with increasing representation, increasing diversity within their programs, and especially as it relates to racial and ethnic diversity, their hands are tied. So unfortunately, the political climate dictates for now what you can do. In a state like Illinois, where I'm in, you know, we're fortunate, I can say, to have a governor who supports, you know, diversity, supports affirmative action, but if the tides were to change, who knows what would happen from the educational front, not only for physical therapy programs, but even looking at the pathways to get into PT programs or PTA programs from middle school, from high school to community colleges, et cetera. What does that look like? So, you know, one thing that we have to do is just try to stand our ground as much as we can, and really fight the fight to say, hey, you know what? We need to be here, and certain measures that are afforded for affirmative action. And again, recognizing that affirmative action is not just about race and ethnicity, it's also about gender. And they forget that part when they try to take away something that, you know, threatens certain people in positions of power and privilege, but really getting people to understand the why behind certain initiatives such as this to diversify our institutions, our educational institutions, in order to make a better society.
Yeah. And I would just add that, I'm sorry, no, go ahead.
I'm not on the panel, but I would like to add something. I would like to add something to a lot of things. This was wonderful, you all. But also, it comes from the top too. You know, we talk about institutional racism. It comes from the top. And when you look at our administrators are changing, our presidents of the universities are changing. And as I've been in this field for a long time, I noticed a difference in how we proceed in our admissions process, depending on who's the president and who's the chair. Mm. Believe it or not, it makes a difference. Mm. It really does. And so I've been at a university where I'm the only African American person, but because we have this rubric that we have to follow, mm-hmm. we weren't getting in the program. But then when other people start talking and the president here, why we don't have any African Americans in this program? Or our African American president at another university may say, no, we need to start having African Americans in our program. Mm-hmm. You know, and sometimes, and I think, and even with the chairs, and when our people in those positions say things, then things happen. Mm-hmm. That's one thing I've noticed. I've noticed a lot over my years, but that's one thing I wanted to point out.
And I just wanted to add that, you know, especially, and I challenged Rhonda when we did this last year, and I said, what's our action plan? Where are we going? And I think that, you know, she said tonight, you know, about creating a cohort. Bernard has talked about that. We have 2 national organizations that are African American, primarily membership driven. And but we've got to make our seat at the table, being involved in policy at the national and the state level, just as important as it is for us to go to our sorority meetings, our fraternity meetings, to be involved in our church groups, because this is really about sustainability of a craft in a particular group of people, because the number of Black physical therapists is not increasing. It probably hit its peak in the mid 2000s when there were programs at Alabama State, Georgia State University, FAMU, Howard, that created these pipelines for students, especially for physical therapists. Those pipelines are no longer there. And when those programs dried up, then students are trying to get into the programs the best they can without this undergirthing. And I think that, you know, we on this call maybe have to say in our own community, what can we do? What can we do? How many of us are serving on a Illinois Physical Therapy Association committee? How many of us are serving on a national committee? How many of us are willing to do this or that to help advance this cause? So I think that if we're this interested and we're taking this time to be here, then we need to come up with actionable items individually and collectively.
And be a part of our organizations like American Academy of Physical Therapy and other organizations that are actually pushing the agenda. The cohorts who actually established the American Academy of Physical Therapy, they've gotten older. You're talking about Babs, you're talking about Diane, you're talking about B.B. Clemens, and Leon. We are those new people, but we have to be on the forefront like they were. And I think that, you know, we're coming out of COVID for 3 years. We see how important physical therapy is because, you know, we deal with obesity, we deal with blood pressure, we deal with things that, you know, nurses and physicians give medications. We actually provide services that make you better. And so I think that even people on this call, we need to be more involved in organizations who push that political agenda, because it's all connected to politics. Believe me, you know. So if you're not on the floor of the political, your state and federal government and your associations, all we talk about is never going to happen, because those policies drive what's important.
Oh wow!
And the dollars too, because when you look at the dollars, and we talk about increasing the minority population, somebody said it doesn't always include us in those minority populations. It could be somebody else. You know, another group of people. You know, so I've seen that a lot too. So what's happening there?
Yeah. Okay. We are going to move. Look, I said ouch in the chat because it always comes back to what are you going to do? You know, you think about that little girl that was putting on her seatbelt. She kept telling her daddy, worry about yourself, worry about yourself. Well, when we worry about ourselves appropriately, that is reaching out to others and that is doing our part. So there's a question in the chat for you, Ms. Fields. You've suggested a service learning component added to PT and PTA programs, and this person would like to hear what that looks like to you.
So the service learning component would be kind of to service the community that these programs are based in. There are a lot of African-American people, like, so for instance, Malcolm X, where I came from, that is a largely predominant Black neighborhood. However, the PTA program did not represent that. There was only 3 Black students, only 2 finished. So it's not, you know, it's also not being aware that these programs are there. However, if you do a service learning component, so far as maybe a community therapy gym or something like that, people are exposed to those programs earlier on, and then they know the importance of those programs, and then you can continue to kind of inform and educate throughout. And like I said in the chat up earlier, that patients are more compliant with therapists that look like them. And Mr. Alsbury touched on that as well. You're able to build a rapport in your community, and you're able to pull people from that community to kind of want to do those same things that you are doing to help them or help their family members.
I love that. I love that. Anybody else have a comment to add to that? Thank you. I appreciate that. All right. There's another question in the chat that says the public often thinks that high grades and high GRE scores make someone the most qualified, and that is not true. There are so many other more important attributes. So can we speak to what a couple of those attributes are? I think we already talked about that, but I want to reiterate that because I do feel like I know that I did not have the strongest grades in school. I know that I was not the strongest critical thinker coming out of school, but one thing I had was empathy. I wanted my patients to get better. And I felt like because I wanted that so badly, I was going to find whatever it was to make that happen. So talk to us about some of those other attributes that you think are important for a physical therapist or a physical therapist assistant student.
You have to care about people. And you can't be afraid to talk to people, and you can't be afraid to touch people. You have some people with phenomenal grades, and they're afraid to do range of motion on the patient. They move your leg, move your arm, scoot over this way, and you have to be really good with. You have to have a personality that you have empathy, and people have to feel that because that's your best therapist. It's your best any healthcare profession. But in our profession, when you're talking to people, when we do actual evaluations, we're actually talking to people for a period of time and documenting that, you have to build that trust quickly. Because if you don't, you really can't get to the root of what the issues are.
That's right. That's right. That's right. Anybody else want to add to that? Any other attributes that you feel make a quality clinician?
I'll jump on and answer. Being present and being yourself. Being yourself is tantamount. Patients know when you're being fake. They know when you're kind of just dialing it in, and they're not going to respond well, whether that be outcomes or just kind of emotionally, socially with the therapist. One of the reasons why I did go into home healthcare is because a lot of the people that I ended up servicing only got about 15 minutes of kind of contact with a therapist, and they never had any outcomes. And they could tell that I showed up, I was my authentic self, and they worked hard for me because I showed up as me. So that's kind of one of the most important things to do, is kind of just show up as yourself, represent yourself, your brand, whatever that may be to you, and you'll be successful.
I love that. Your brand. Go ahead, Dr. Brown.
I like that too, your brand. I think another thing, to make it successful is just practicing empathy, especially with our patients, but also amongst ourselves, and just recognizing that, yes, we all may be, Black professionals, Black physical therapists, Black physical therapist assistants, but also recognize that we all have similar but also different lived experiences and different perspectives that allows us to, interpret our situation similarly or differently, whether it be in education, whether it be in clinical practice, whether it be in positions of leadership. And so even listening to each other and appreciating each other and recognizing that we are not monolithic. I do research in the space of leadership and motivation, and I do that through the lens of diversity, equity, and inclusion. And I often cringe when I review other leadership studies where they put all of the so-called minorities in one group as if we're one race, if you will. So they throw all the Black people in there, they throw the Hispanics in there, they throw the Asians in there. And it's like, we're not a monolithic group. And even amongst Black people, we are not monolithic. And so just recognizing that, showing ourselves grace and mercy, being empathetic with our stories, and recognizing that, not everyone grew up a certain way with certain privileges or lack thereof, and being willing to, like I put in the chat and I said earlier, elevate and uplift our own voices from where we are and where we're going to go. So empathy goes a long way with our patients and even with each other.
Awesome.
That's very important, doctor, because how many times we walked into someone's house if you did home health or a sick patient, and for half an hour, you're just talking about what's going on. I better get this treatment in. because that's all a part of what we do. You know, good therapists, they'll go in there in 15 minutes, 20 minutes, you're talking about from the kids to this to that, and showing the empathy, and everybody comes from a different place. And that's part of what we do. And that makes a difference in their lives and their healing process.
All are speaking some knowledge tonight. All right, there's one more question here in the chat, and it says, how can we encourage and promote entrepreneurship for Black and Brown PTs to be leaders and in the forefront of their communities? Dr. Cox, I'm going to ask you to go ahead and answer that. I really want to promote this to our PTs and PTAs. Dr. Cox can talk more about it herself, but she and her husband developed a game called Physio U that helps students learn and prepare for their PT boards, I'm assuming, and just PT in general. Speak to your craft, dear.
Well, I would say, wait, let me see the question again. Well, I'll just speak about entrepreneurship. If you have an idea, if God give you something, write it down and make it plain. It does not matter if you're still in school. You can still start a business while you're in school. As far as me and my husband's cash-based business, Top Notch Physical Therapy, that was a name we came up with when we were still in PT school. We weren't even married yet, didn't have any kids yet. We just knew that we didn't want to work for nobody else. We knew that we had that entrepreneurial spirit, and that we wanted to make a difference in not only our lives but those around us. We are reaching, and we're wanting a generational wealth. We're wanting time freedom. And so those are the things that we are looking for and wanting when we are, thinking about our business. And so even with that, so of course I have also we have physio trivia. So physio trivia is a fast card game. And so it's used for board prep, is good for just game nights, icebreakers. So you don't think it just has to be for students. It's for your colleagues. It's for when you guys are doing retreats. It's for when you're in the classroom, with your students. It's for everybody that's in the profession. And so we have a website, www.physiotrivia.com. You can see different videos of it, students playing in the classroom. We got Alabama State, Mercer University, FAMU. Right now, we're doing an Instagram live against different schools. They are competing against each other. So Baylor, St. Augustine. And so it's a very fun and interactive, but it's also just gives students and those in the field a break from just life, and gives you a chance to relax. But also, you have your games, you have Uno, but now you got something that you can actually, it's your game. It's physio trivia. So something just fun that you can bring to when you're with your group of friends that's in the same field as well. But as far as the entrepreneur, yes, so you want to write it down, write down your goals of what you want to accomplish, and just do a little bit at a time. Don't feel like you have to accomplish everything at once. Don't think everything is going to come at once. You might have all these things down, but it might be 4 years later. It might be 3 months. But as long as you working on something and not going backwards or standing or not working at all, I think it would be good. And also just having good mentorship and friends that can critique you and that you can get feedback from. I think that's very important. I have a group of PT friends that we bounce things off. When I'm creating flyers or if I'm sending things out, they'll look over it before I send out. They'll say, oh no, do this or switch. You just need to have a someone. It don't even have to be a group, just someone that you can go to as a mentor within that entrepreneur realm as well.
Yeah. And I just wanted to add, kind of for the last question and for this question, that there's this wonderful article. It talks about how we talk to our children, and it says, instead of saying to our kids, wow, you're really smart, you're a genius, that we really should say things to them like, you're working hard. I like the way you're problem solving. I like the way you're working through this. And so I say that to say that for students and as an entrepreneur, you can't be afraid of failure. And I know that there are many of us on this call, on this panel in particular, who've had businesses. We've been impassioned to do something. We started a business, and maybe we had the business for a number of years and closed it and then went on and did something else. Because I know, like, I probably am on number 5 of some iteration of an entrepreneurial experience. And whether they turn out the way I thought they were, it's okay. It's all about the process. And school is the same. I think that now, there's so many factors that tell students you're not going to be successful. You're not going to be able to do this. When I went to PT school, I had no idea how hard it was to get into PT school. I had no idea. I just knew that this was something that I loved. It was something that I thought connected with every fiber of my being. And I just went for it. And when I started PT school, then I learned, oh my God, like, how did I even get in here? I don't even know. But I think that innocence and that desire just to move your dreams forward is so important as a student. It's also so important as an entrepreneur, because sometimes you're going to be in spaces where there's nobody to move your dreams forward or to believe in you but you. And somehow, somewhere, you've got to have this little spark that you keep with you all the time, that somehow you just kind of keep it smoldering, that in those times when nobody else believes that you can get through, or you're going to do well, or maybe you failed a clinical and they're bringing you back and you're like, oh my gosh, I'm done, that you're not done, because you've got this spark, you've got a belief in yourself that's bigger than anything else these people on the outside see.
Yeah. Yes, I love that. I think that failure is your attempt at success, and it is not failure. It is just another attempt. And I think that is something that is so key, especially in our culture. I think it's easy for us to get down on ourselves because of what we don't have and things of that nature. But I do like the fact that all of us tonight have said that you just have to keep going. You have to keep going. You have to keep going. And on that note, I've been trying to play with my cards, and I'll tell you how inefficient I am as a professor. I'll just let you know. So I'm going to have some of my colleagues come over so we can do a game night and I can figure out how to play this game. Listen, we are going to wrap up really shortly. I do want to encourage each and every one of you to fill out the survey. I have put it in the chat a couple of times. I'll try to put it in there one more time on tonight. It really just helps me kind of figure out what to do moving forward, and if these programs are beneficial, and how to serve you as a community moving forward. One of the things that I want to end with, unless there are any more questions or if the panel has anything else that they would like to say, one of the things that I'd like to end with, I'll give you a second and give you a moment, but I want to show you all a quick clip of the video that I got to complete with the interview with Mr. Babbs. So for all of you who don't know, Mr. Robert Babbs is a pillar in our community. He graduated from Northwestern in 1957, and he was a physical therapist at Providence Hospital, Mercy Hospital, and finished his career at the University of Chicago. And I got the opportunity to shadow him when I was 16 years old, and really one of the reasons why I'm a physical therapist today. And he's touched so many lives also on this panel alone. And it was just a great opportunity to just touch base with him and to talk to him about his journey. So his video will be on the event website. I'll go ahead and put that in the chat again. Please don't let this be the last time that you check us out. You can check out the website, and you can reach any of our panel members through that. You can just hit contact Ms. Fields, contact Ann Jackson, and you can get directly to their email. So that is the website that I just put in there. And will the recording be made available? Good question. So I am going to post the recording on the website. So if you keep this link here of the website, you will have that recording and you can refer back to that. Okay? Any closing comments from the panel while I pull up this video? You can have the floor.
Thank you for having all of us. It was great,
Yes.
everyone. And
Thank
it was
you.
just phenomenal. I love this type of stuff.
Yes.
I do too. I get to be with my folks and see y'all. So I appreciate it. All right. So this video with Mr. Babs is about 18 minutes long. I won't take the whole time to do that. You can look at it at your leisure. But one of the last questions that I asked him was, if you could talk to your younger self and give your younger self some advice, what would it be? And so this is his answer. If I can get back to the screen properly. There we go. Okay. No. He's gentleman. So you can't hear it? What is that doing that? Okay. Give me 1 second. And if not, I'll just put it in the chat. I love technology and I hate it also. Let's try this one more time. I'm sure. Let's see here. You can turn the mic off here. All right. Here we go. Nope. No sound. Okay, then I quit. I'll put it in the chat. I'll put it in the chat and I'll tell you what he said. I don't like it. I get so frustrated with that. I'm going to calm down though. We've had a good session, so I'm going to end with this. I asked Mr. Babs, I said, what would you tell your younger self? And he said that I would tell myself simply this: if you love what you're doing, then it's not a job. And so if you don't love what you do, every morning you get up and you're not excited to go to work, doesn't mean that you're not going to have frustrations. It doesn't mean that you're not going to have trials. But if you are not excited about what you do on a daily basis, then it's the wrong profession for you and you need to get out. And so that is something that he has kept with him for so many years. He practiced for over 40 years and he loved what he did. And I can attest to that myself. I love helping other people come into this profession. I believe everybody on the panel can attest to that. Believe me, it gets hard and I don't like it. And I cuss and I fuss many days. But at the end of the day, when I rest my head, I do believe that I am doing what I'm supposed to be doing.
You are.
So again, I appreciate each and every one of you. Thank you so much for your time and attention. I will again post all the videos and everything on the website so that you can refer back to it and that you can spend some time listening and reflecting on the history of our profession and the evolution of the Black physical therapist. Thank you so much.
Great job.
All right.